Hi everybody!
There is a timeless quality to The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero. It's the first game in the Crossbell Duology and the fourth entry in the Trails subseries of The Legend of Heroes. I'll be upfront, this entry is not my favorite in this series. Of the ones I've played, it's actually towards the bottom. However, its sequel, Trails to Azure, is so far one of my favorites. In this video, I'm going to cover my feelings on Trails from Zero. Despite it being in the bottom rung of Trails games for me, it's actually a very good game. Before we get into the meat of the review, I have to cover the background on this game. It originally released in September of 2010 for the PSP. By that point in time, the PSP was long in the tooth, having been on the market for 5 years. The PS Vita was also just around the corner for a Japanese release. At this point in time, Western audiences didn't even have access to a localization for the first Trails in the Sky game. That would come in early 2011 for North America, and way later that year for Europe. Basically, the series was fighting an uphill battle when it came to establishing itself in the West. This was partially because of the issues Xseed Games faced during the localization process. It took a further 4 years for Western audiences to get Trails in the Sky Second Chapter for PSP and PC. It was a further 2 years before Western fans were able to experience Sky Third Chapter, by which point the PSP was pretty much a shambling corpse. Much like I am when I first wake up.
Wait, only when you wake up? Don't you mean every single waking moment of your life? You don't sleep anyways. You're an insomniac wacko.
As a result of these delays, Falcom told Xseed to prioritize localizing the Trails of Cold Steel arc. The Japanese player base were able to experience the first of the Erebonian games in late 2013, and us Western plebiscites had to wait until 2015 to experience it. Meaning Crossbell was going to have to wait, and boy was it a long wait. Fans of the series had to wait until 2022 to experience the first game in the Crossbell Duology, by which point some of the design choices felt a bit antiquated. Anyways, it's time I stopped playing History Professor and got to the game review.
Alright, sit your ass down and get ready to get schooled.
If you've watched my previous video about where to start the Trails games, you'll have seen that Trails from Zero is a good entryway into the series. I feel that if you're looking for a more refined but basic JRPG, this is a good one to start with. The story, despite spoiling some of the storylines from the Sky trilogy, is able to stand on its own 2 feet. Clearly, you will get more out of the story if you've played the Sky games. However, since I started with the Cold Steel games, I can tell you you'll get a lot out of Zero if you started with those. The Crossbell Duology is quite literally a nice bridging game. Without spoiling the story for Trails from Zero, you basically play as Lloyd Bannings, Ellie McDowell, Randy Orlando, and Tio Plato, who are all members of the freshly established SSS, a new police unit that's tasked with doing a mix of police work and bracer work. I'll get into the police work and bracer work more when we reach the gameplay section. Basically, the story revolves around these rookies coming together and making a found family, which, if you play the Trails games for any length of time, you'll notice found families are at the heart of every storyline to some degree. Anyways, moving on with the story. The SSS, as the narrative progresses, uncover more and more of the seedy underbelly of the crime world within Crossbell. Political intrigue has always been another trope used within the Trails universe, and it's during the Crossbell Duology that it's closest to its most obvious. The Erebonian arc also has it woven into its narrative rather overtly. Anyways, this is as vague as I can make the story section of this video, as I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But if you're looking for a good storyline, Zero has you covered. The narrative of this duology is Falcom at their best. Moving on to the gameplay though, this is where I feel Trails from Zero falls flat. It's not the worst turn-based JRPG I've experienced. In fact, it's not the worst JRPG in terms of gameplay either. It's just the game doesn't feature the refinements to gameplay found with Trails of Cold Steel 1 through 4. That's not to say I hate Zero's gameplay, far from it. It's just there are some things that could have been improved, which were improved upon in later iterations of the series. This is one thing I will applaud Falcom on. They are always improving the formula of their games. So where do I feel the gameplay let the game down? For one, I found enemies a little too spongy even if I optimized my orbments. Keep in mind, I was playing at normal difficulty. I do also understand why Falcom made this decision. one they corrected in Azure. I feel like Falcom made the choice to make enemies spongy so players would feel like they're up against the seemingly insurmountable odds the SSS face. I can respect that choice, but I don't enjoy damaged sponges. I would much rather smarter enemies. This is something I feel the Cold Steel games do better. The slog of the enemies taking more damage to take down really made it harder for me to get through the game despite enjoying the story. But this isn't the only thing I find a bit of a slog with the first 5 games in the Trails franchise. The way you develop characters is actually one thing I'm not the biggest fan of. To improve your characters, you need to basically min-max your characters by deciding to double down on 1 or 2 specific colors of orbs. So if you want access to higher end magic, you have to load up on that one type. So if you want the best fire-based spells, load up on it. Your other option is to give your characters lots of different orbs to have access to a large range of spells. I know that a lot of Trail stalwarts love this aspect of character building. I personally prefer how Cold Steel does it, because it's far more simplified in how to do it, and it doesn't feel as limiting in how you can build your characters if you want access to higher end magic. But I can see how some would prefer the older system. I know I've been a bit harsh on this game.
You want to talk about tough? Let me do a cut-in. Let me do an actual review of this game. I will tear it to pieces!
But I do like it. So let's get into the things I like about this game. I really love the characters, all of them are memorable and likable. That's something Falcom is always strong with, having strong characters that are interesting and usually flip the tropes they fall under on their head. The story is also one of the more interesting ones in the Trails series, and it's vital for understanding later entries. As always, the music by sound team JDK is top-notch. The gameplay for the time it released was simple but very good. Basically, Zero has all of the building blocks of a good game. My final rating is a 7.5 out of 10. So those were just my thoughts on Trails from Zero. What did you think of the game? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. 2 of my previous videos will be popping up on screen now. One is why Kuro no Kiseki does not look like a PS3 game. For those that don't know, Kuro is the newest entry in the Trails series. The other video is where to start the Trails games. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.